Hello, everyone, and we are live. Welcome back to Staking Mondays. My name is Ken. I'm here with the co-founder of Staking Rewards, Mirko Schmiedel, and today we have with us Michael Kong, the CEO and CIO of Fantom Foundation. Fantom is an alternative Layer 1 EVM blockchain and one of the first to launch liquid staking on a protocol level. So, Michael, let's jump right into it. Some lightning round questions for you. What was your first investment outside of BTC and Ethereum, and why?
Probably like the DAO token, if you guys remember that from 2016. A little bit notorious, yeah.
All right, that's a good one. And what do you think currently is the most underrated project in crypto?
Well, I'm a little bit biased, so obviously, like number one most underrated project is Fantom at the moment. In terms of others, not really sure. Yeah.
And Michael, which project most inspired the launch of Fantom?
Ethereum for sure, yeah, because we wanted to have a generalized smart contract platform, but have it like on a better consensus engine, faster, cheaper, etc.
Cool. And who's your personal crypto hero? Who inspired you?
Like inspired me in the early days.
Yeah, I think in the early days. So generally like throughout your crypto journey.
Definitely Vitalik, yeah, because what he did, constructing the first like smart contract platform was quite innovative. I mean, like there were a number of issues with it, but on the whole, it was something that was very new and definitely like well executed at the time.
Vitalik is a very popular answer for that question. I think we had almost every guess except one quote Vitalik. So your personal crypto portfolio, how much percentage-wise is staked?
I don't really go into like many details about my personal investments, but I own a bunch of crypto. Some of it staked, some of it not, some of it in DeFi, some of it in other things. Yeah.
Fair enough. And what's an activity for you to relax from the wild crypto markets?
Swimming, water-based sports. Absolutely. I try and swim like every day, even if the weather's not that good.
Big fan of the water activity, skiing, riding the jet ski, riding a boat, anything like that. Yeah.
Swimming, free diving, sailing, kayaking, paddleboarding. Gonna get into things like kite surfing as well. Yeah. Anything really to do with the water.
Really cool. Okay, so guys, we're going to break into the episode here. Today, we're going to talk a lot about native liquid staking, Andre Cronje leaving crypto, EVM and Layer 2 competition, and the grand vision of Fantom. And we have a little teaser announcement at the end of the episode as well. So make sure you stay tuned for the whole episode, guys. And as a community, as you guys are watching, feel free to ask questions from Michael, and we'll ask the community questions at the end of the episode as well. And today's episode is sponsored by Lido Finance. Lido is the market-leading liquid staking solution. With Lido, you can stake Ethereum, Solana, and Terra while keeping full liquidity via staking derivatives. These staking derivatives you use in multiple DeFi applications to generate additional yield. So be sure to check out Lido Finance, guys. And all right, let's break right into these long form questions here. Mirko, take it away.
All right, let's get started. So Fantom is one of the first protocols to natively deploy liquid staking with the sFTM. So what's the design rationale behind it, and what are the advantages and disadvantages to compare to like non-native liquid staking, like for example Lido on Ethereum and so on? What's the disadvantages there for Fantom to have it on the protocol level, basically?
Yeah, so definitely like liquid staking is a very powerful sort of like system, because essentially the big benefit is that without liquid staking, you kind of have like, in terms of like, earning returns on say like your FTM, there's generally like two broad ways. One is via like staking on the network, so that's participating in proof of consensus, either like running your own validator node or delegating to a validator node where the validator gets 50% of the earnings, but you keep the other 85%. You don't have to worry about maintaining a node, or you can and you earn like block rewards from that, transaction fees, etc. Or you can participate in the DeFi ecosystem by, for example, like depositing your FTM in a contract, collateralizing it, generating, for example, like other cryptos out of it, or like for example like stable coins, and then using that to lend, borrow, farm, etc., in the DeFi ecosystem. What liquid staking does is that it kind of takes like it allows you to kind of do both. So you can stake and you can also participate in DeFi, because what happens generally is that you would stake your FTM into a validated node, and then you generate like basically a separate token that you need to redeem in order to unstake your tokens, sFTM or whatever, like a derivative of FTM, right? And then now you have this like FTM representation of your, you have this derivative that represents your staked FTM, and then you use that, to participate in like the DeFi ecosystem, that sort of thing. So the real benefit there is that now you get kind of like two sets of returns, or you get like added utility rather than having to like choose between the two. There is one big disadvantage though with liquid staking, and that is your network becomes a bit less secure, because you need to have a slashing mechanism in place for nodes that, according to network parameters, don't behave very well, because otherwise you suffer from what's known as the nothing at stake problem, right? And then your network isn't really secure, because then people can act maliciously on the network and suffer no penalties for it. With liquid staking, what happens is that because like part of your stake can be used for DeFi, it means that that part of the stake wouldn't be slashable, right? And so your network security does go down, but the question is like, to what extent is that an acceptable level? So if it goes down a bit, but you get a lot of benefits from liquid staking, being able to participate in DeFi protocols, then net, that's like a huge positive for the ecosystem. So our original idea with liquid staking was with sFTM, you'll generate FTM. You'd stake your FTM, you'd generate sFTM, and then sFTM, you'd be able to generate like a certain amount based on your FTM, and then use that to collateralize and to generate, say, like FUSD or stablecoin that you could participate in the Fantom DeFi ecosystem. Now we're kind of stepping a bit back from like sFTM, because fortunately there are ecosystem providers that are providing the same sort of service. So as you mentioned, like Lido is one that like provides services, say like with Ethereum on Fantom. There's like Anchor, there's Beefy, there are others that are coming along, and so there's going to be like an ecosystem of liquid staking providers as well that people can kind of choose from, and get that sort of benefit, and that's going to be like run independently from the foundation, or just have foundation involvement in terms of how you actually integrate with the staked FTM. So that's basically liquid staking in a nutshell. The benefits, disadvantage of it as well, though. But yeah, that's what's happening right now in Fantom.
So besides the liquid staking sFTM on Fantom, you also welcome like third-party liquid staking providers to the chain, or like you want to step back from sFTM and also bring others on board, or what's the agenda there in general?
Yeah, I mean, generally, whenever the ecosystem can add value, or whenever like participants in the ecosystem can add value to users, to the ecosystem as a whole, that to us is a real plus, right? Whether it comes to liquid staking or whether it comes to, say, NFT marketplaces or whatever it might be. So the fact that a number of participants are looking to offer like liquid staking, like as I mentioned before, like Anchor and Beefy are just two of them that like recently announced, and there'll probably be more coming. That's really, really good, because then it's just a community that's sort of come together to offer this sort of service to users of the Fantom ecosystem. So for us, that's a big benefit. And so whenever the foundation can kind of take a step back and just focus on its core technology, the core middleware, the core development, the middleware development, etc., and leave other applications to the community, that's always a great thing, because that's exactly the position that we want to be in. We don't want a foundation running like everything, like running like Fantom name service, or running liquid staking, or like running all like applications and features on the chain. We want to have it as much community driven as possible. Just like with Ethereum, how you have the Ethereum Foundation there, they're working on the underlying technology. They have some influence over the network, of course, but largely it's left up to just people in the community, developers that are building great applications and kind of taking the chain forward. And that's the sort of position that the Fantom Foundation also wants to be to the Fantom ecosystem chain.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And, having other contributors from the community, you can also benefit from the network effect that creates as well. And ultimately, your network becomes more fulfilled when you have more contributors like that.
Exactly, but that's how you get exponential growth, where 2 people tell 4 people, tell 8 people, etc. Rather than linear growth, where it's a foundation, approaching projects one after the other. So we obviously want to have the exponential growth, and that's exactly why we have this sort of like strategy that we do at the moment.
Okay, and getting back to liquid staking with sFTM, what have you noticed in terms of user behavior post-launch? What's the biggest takeaway after post-launch of sFTM?
The biggest takeaway is that people definitely do want to participate in it. If you're someone who is staking and you want to also participate in DeFi, here's kind of your opportunity to do it. You can earn like pretty good rewards participating in consensus, which of course is very critical to protecting the network. But now, if you want to participate in DeFi, you can do that too. So not everyone who's staking would participate in liquid staking though, because there's still a risk with liquid staking, because obviously, the tokens that that you participate in DeFi with, these like derivative like FTM tokens, if they somehow get lost or get liquidated or something like that, then yeah, you still have your staked FTM that's earning rewards, but you won't be able to unstake them until you pay back the debt. So even though liquid staking offers great functionality to FTM holders, there still is additional risk, which is that DeFi risk to the staked FTM. So we won't see like everybody who's staking participating in liquid staking, but we would see like a good proportion of them. And it's kind of like early days right now. You're gonna give like specific numbers, but it'll be curious to see over the next few months, how many people actually like participate in liquid staking. I don't think it will be the majority, but it would be like a significant minority.
Cool. Can you give us like a quick overview, or like a just like what's the current landscape of sFTM utility in other DeFi applications? Like where can you use it, and how much is that being utilized, and like where do you see what are the current biggest use cases basically for sFTM?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that the foundation like hasn't done very well. So we actually like announced liquid staking like months ago, right? And we do have this like sFTM liquid staking contract where people who stake their FTM can generate sFTM, and then with the sFTM, it's not like an ERC20 contract. It's like kind of like its own special contract, and you need that in order to like stop in order to still have a slashing mechanism, because if someone generates 100% the sFTM and then the node gets slashed, well, they still have like sFTM they can be redeemed for FTM. And so with that sFTM, you were able to collateralize it at about like a 300% collateralization ratio to generate FUSD. And then FUSD, which is like native token on Fantom, you would be able to participate in DeFi protocols. So that was the underlying idea. However, we didn't really execute FUSD that well, which is why it's on the peg. We have there is somebody in the community who's made I think a pretty strong proposal to kind of take over FUSD that will be announced fairly shortly, probably maybe even this week or the following week. And so that ecosystem team would be able to like help support FUSD, such that people would then be able to take advantage of having sFTM, because using sFTM at the moment doesn't really get you that many benefits, because there aren't like DeFi protocols that are using FUSD, but in the future they might be able to use FUSD. Particularly, we have like auctions and liquidations for FUSD to make sure that the price kind of stabilizes at $1 per FUSD, because it's kind of like a debt-based stablecoin, similar to like the way that DAI works or Unit Protocol works, or how like some of these other like debt-based stablecoins work. So right now there isn't that much functionality, but I think there will be in the future. There's also more functionality coming out with other liquid staking providers, like as I mentioned before. So that's very exciting to see. I think Anchor and Beefy just announced like a week or two ago. So kind of like, again, like early days to see what data is available. But I think in a few months we'll know like what sort of like usage they're getting.
Yeah, very exciting, and we'll stay tuned to see the developments of USD and the additional utilities coming out down the line here. So put yourself in the mind of a developer. What's the incentive for developers to build on Fantom today compared to other chains? Is there a grant program, or what kind of incentives do you have in place?
Yeah, there is a grant program at the moment for DeFi and NFTs projects. It has to do with like usage, with TVL, so if you deploy a project on Fantom, you get enough traction, you basically get monthly FTM incentives that are designed to support like the project. So for example, like used for like, like providing like staking rewards, as a DeFi project, just to give an example. So, there is like that incentive program in existence at the moment, which we may like modify over time. But more generally, you're tapping into like a very strong ecosystem, with over like 2.4 million unique wallet addresses, with hundreds of thousands of people probably on average like using it on like a monthly basis, having processed over like 200 million transactions since the chain launched on the end of 2019. So there's like a lot of users, and there's a lot of people who know how to use the Fantom network, particularly with DeFi, because how you use the Fantom network as a user, it's very similar to how you use, say, the Ethereum network. Because all the smart contracts are kind of written in the EVM. So the way that you write, compile, and deploy smart contracts on Ethereum works the same way as on Fantom. So our pitch has always been to people developing on Fantom that, if you know how to develop on Fantom, if you know how to develop on Ethereum, you know how to develop on Fantom. And you can take advantage of faster, cheaper consensus where instead of, for example, paying $100 or $200 for a swap, you may be paying 50 cents or $1 in comparison. So it's like orders of magnitude cheaper, and you only need one block confirmation in order for your transaction to be confirmed. So it's not based on the longest chain rule. It's not based on like, okay, you need 5 or 6 blocks after the first block, it's mined. It's as soon as you get 2/3 plus 1 of the total validating power of the network, your transaction is confirmed. And blocks are usually produced in actually about like 0.8 or 0.9 seconds currently. And so because the network runs processes transaction asynchronously, it means that it can process transactions or process blocks, multiple blocks simultaneously. So that's very different, say, from like Bitcoin or Ethereum, where you process blocks sequentially. One block has to be mined at a time, followed by another, followed by another. For the Fantom network, it's completely different. Multiple blocks can be confirmed simultaneously around the same time. And then we have a series of algorithms that get you that final ordering of transactions. So, this is an underlying technology that benefits, people that want to develop on the network. And it's all about, fast transactions, cheap transactions, and also secure transactions, of course.
Cool. So how do you think will like the Ethereum merge, if it's going to happen like in the next months or like within this year or whenever? How's that going to impact Fantom and like the developers developing on your chain and so on? Like, because obviously Ethereum going to be much more scalable and faster as well. How do you see that impacting Fantom?
So when you mention like Ethereum merge, I assume you're talking about like ETH 2.0, right? Or
yeah, I mean, is 2.0. Yeah, like once they deploy sharding and like everything will move to the ETH2 basically.
Yeah, the thing about Ethereum is that I think the development timelines I never like as what they initially state or indicate that they're going to be like. And I'm not saying that like super critically, because this is like very like difficult technology to work with, right? Like very difficult technology, to kind of like improve, to increase scalability of, just because of the amount of moving pieces, the complexity, and the fact that there's billions of dollars, say, on Fantom, and of course on Ethereum there's many more billions of dollars in TVL and activity and that sort of thing. So like all of this work is very hard. So with ETH 2.0, I don't think it's going to come out anytime soon. And I think in the past, Ethereum has experimented with different scaling solutions. So I don't know if you guys remember back in 2017, there were kind of like 2 layer 2 solutions that were very often talked about that you don't really hear about anymore. There were Radiant Network and there were Plasma. And Radiant Network was supposed to be like like the Lightning Network to Ethereum, just like the Lightning Network is to Bitcoin. And Plasma was supposed to be, some like layer 2, kind of sort of like similar like sharding concept, but not exactly sharding. And those two like didn't really work out. for like a number of different reasons, right? So I think ETH2.0 though is definitely like a lot more solid because they thought a lot more about it. That being said, I don't think it gets as scalable as like other layer ones out there, like such as Fantom, because you're still processing transactions synchronously, and sharding is like a very difficult problem. And so I think like even if the Ethereum network gets more scalable, I think the current environment that we see right now and also going into the future is that they're going to be like multiple layer ones, right? There won't be like 10 layer ones or 20 layer ones, but there'll be like a few layer ones, so like 3 or 4. And like Fantom's objective is kind of like stay in that top category and to be leading that top category. And one area that Ethereum like hasn't really focused on, which is kind of interesting because there have been proposals and a lot of discussions around this, but like I've seen these like EIPs kind of be rejected. It's kind of like fixing the gas model, and more importantly, fixing the smart contract execution model, because the performance of the EVM and other tools related to EVM is very, very limiting. So on, for example, like the Fantom network, as you'll see on other networks, the EVM limits your network throughput by a factor of over 90%, right? So without the EVM, you can do 90% more transactions. And we've seen that on Fantom. For example, like, we've done internal testing where we get easily tens of thousands of transactions per second. No problem without the EVM. But once you add the EVM in there, you get only like a few thousand transactions per second possible. And the reason is because of a lot of inefficiencies with the EVM. Now, the EVM is great because it was built in 2014. It was the first smart contract execution engine. It still works well, obviously, because people can deploy smart contracts on there, but there's a lot of inefficiencies on there. So what Fantom is working on is kind of eventually replacing the entire middleware stack, with our own FEM, with our own kind of like tool sets, with our own sort of ways of reading and writing data from the nodes to the network. And we've identified those problems by a lot of research we've done, for academic research at the University of Sydney and Yonsei University. And we know the solution to a lot of these problems. Now it's a matter of execution. So we can execute these problems over the next couple of years really, really successfully. You're going to see like Fantom's network vastly more scalable than it currently is. And that's really no exaggeration. For example, if you replace the way that reads and writes are done with the EVM on chain with a new data structure, you can literally get like a 4 or 5 times performance increase on some of these more complicated smart contracts that get executed, in particular related to DeFi. So that's already like a huge benefit that we've studied and identified, and that we have already like a solution to. It just needs to be engineered. So, a lot of discussions have been on scaling, layer ones, helping to scale layer ones with layer twos. But I think what a lot of people are missing is that there's actually another part of the layer if you're a smart contract platform, which is scaling out the smart contract execution engine. And that's what differentiates, I think, Fantom from other projects, is that we're really focused on solving that problem, because that is a major, major problem. It's probably like one of the biggest scalability problems out there, is how do you actually make the middleware or the virtual machine much more efficient? It's not just about consensus. I think it's a mistake when people say, oh, we just need to scale consensus. Yeah, we need to scale consensus, but you have to also scale other parts of the ecosystem. Otherwise, you're still going to have that limiting factor no matter how good your consensus is.
Absolutely. And you talk about the scaling for the middleware. Have you ever thought about getting rid of EVM in its entirety?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, that is exactly the plan. 100%. We're going to replace the EVM with, I won't get into all the technical details, but like a register-based machine that generates proofs on the fly for people who compile to it. So right now the EVM, it doesn't give you any feedback, as to the correctness of your programming language. We're designing an EVM that gives you that level of correctness, that tells you mathematically that your smart contract has or doesn't have particular vulnerabilities. And I think that's a very powerful tool in terms of like having better smart contract security. And in terms of performance, you switch to a register-based machine, you switch to a different way of reading and writing data. You switch like many different components with the middleware, you get vastly better performance as well. And so again, like we identified these problems. We are working with people who literally have decades of experience in virtual machines, in programming languages, who like the very like specific details related to how smart contracts gets executed. For example, like we're working with a professor from the University of Sydney who spent 5 years studying the EVM. So, he's a professor that has decades of experience, not just like working with the virtual machines and programming languages, but he's someone who's very familiar with the Fantom technology and very familiar with the EVM. So, he's been studying since the very early days, as I mentioned before, over 5 years since 2016. I know it because I worked with him on studying the EVM and designing software to kind of identify bugs in smart contracts by studying EVM opcodes. So, that's what my background is. That's what his background is in it. That's what the background of other team members who are joining are in it. So I think we had the right team to kind of like execute like a new middleware stack and really bring that, and really be the first people to bring that to the market.
That's awesome. That's really exciting to hear. And I think it's a big thing for you to start with EVM, which is probably a great idea, and then moving away from it. And I think the advantages are, like, you already touched on it. Maybe you can sum that up again, like the advantages of it, like in terms of like making it more efficient and so on. And then are there also like any disadvantages when you like move away from EVM, and like what is the trade-off there kind of?
Yeah. So the reason why like Fantom started off with using the EVM was really for like very like practical commercial reasons. So Fantom started in 2018. We had to rebuild the team, and with the new team, we started working on ABFT, right? And the hardest problem for ABFT is how do you get the final ordering of transactions across n number of nodes when transactions are being submitted asynchronously and being processed like around the same time, right? And how do you do that also in a fault tolerant manner? Because you gotta obviously has to be Byzantine fault tolerant. And in addition to that, how do you do it in the fastest possible way? So we've had like all these criteria in order to work on ABFT. And so it took a lot of time to work on. So it took more than a year and a half to kind of like design a solution. And then it's like, okay, we've got the solution now, or at least we've got the first iteration of it. How do we actually bring this to market? Because it's great, we've got this piece of technology. How do we actually get users? Well, what do we want to build? We wanted to build a generalized smart contract platform from the beginning. The easiest way for us to have done that was to integrate directly with the EVM, because the EVM is something that already works, that people have deployed smart contracts to, that people are familiar with. And so if our pitch is to get developers from Ethereum, starting off with the EVM is a natural choice, because one, it's a familiar development environment, and two, it's something that already kind of works out of the box, so to speak, right? Even though there's a lot of inefficiencies. So for those kind of like two practical reasons, we decided to launch with the EVM to begin with. But it's always been our intention, since we started this middleware research back in 2018, to eventually replace the stack. So in terms of disadvantages, there is only one disadvantage I can think of, and it is backward compatibility. So if we're switching from like one middleware stack to another, so we're moving from the EVM middleware stack to the Fantom middleware stack, there has to be some sort of transition. And so we've kind of talked about two solutions in terms of backward compatibility, how we do it. One, do we get nodes to kind of like run two like virtual machines, and then all code before like a certain block number runs from the old on the old virtual machine EVM, and then all transactions, all blocks afterwards run on the new new virtual machine. That has a lot of advantages, because one, it's not it's not very hard to implement. However, the big disadvantage is that nodes would have to run two sorts of software, so it like adds a bit of complexity. The other way that we can do backward compatibility is if we recompile, and you can prove like the correctness of all the data and all the outcomes in the end via some mathematics. If you recompile all of the transaction history, all of the smart contract transaction history with the new virtual machine, and you kind of like do a hard fork of the chain, and then so people just run the new virtual machine across the new chain, that can also work. One of the disadvantages though is that that's more difficult to kind of execute. It's more tricky because you have to do like an entire hard fork with the network. So that is a disadvantage. In terms of other disadvantages, there aren't really that many, because our intention is to write the compiler from Solidity down to the Fantom virtual machine. So from a developer's perspective, they won't have to learn a new language. They won't have to like, learn a lot of complicated stuff. All they need to do is download like a new tool chain, download a new virtual machine, the Fantom virtual machine, and then interact with that new virtual machine by running different series of instructions or different like flags. So from a developer's point of view, it's minimal learning, but at the same time, they get all these benefits because they run on a much they run on a much faster middleware stack. And in addition to that, you get proof checking. So not just proof checking, in terms of like at the solidity level, like with safe map and all of these like kind of like solidity functions, but you get proof checking more importantly at the virtual machine level, which means that you have a much greater degree of certainty as to the correctness of your programming language, as well as all the speed improvements that you get via this new middleware stack that I kind of like have talked about. So that's sort of like the plan at the moment.
Yeah, and that has a massive impact. I think some of the community here in the chat realizes how big this is. You have Arm the Mistress here. Are you guys hearing this? This is huge. I'd like to reiterate that this is huge. This is a massive development for developing a new virtual machine there from the middleware. So how do you see competition, Michael, between alternative layer one chains and other native scaling solutions like Starkware, Arbitrum, and et cetera on Ethereum? What's your take on the competition between these?
So I think with the layer two solutions, it's quite interesting because it's kind of like a different approach to kind of like scaling up layer one solutions. I do think though that they have like a number of disadvantages they kind of need to think about. Biggest disadvantage is that there's not much like decentralization, because if you are running a layer two and you process transactions on the layer two, and you're saying, well, it's a lot faster and stuff because you don't have to process the transactions on layer one. Well, obviously that means that, there's fewer computers or fewer people processing the transactions on the layer two, which is why it's faster, right? And so you need to find a way of kind of like, how do you incorporate the security of the layer one into the layer two in order for that to work? Now, there's some ideas about it, like with ZK rollups, for example, but that hasn't really come into play yet. That's still kind of like early days. And, for example, we've kind of seen with optimism, or Arbitrum, when you bridge the assets there, you can't immediately take it back on the next block, right? You have to wait like a lot of blocks or 7 days, right? And the reason why is because if they allowed withdrawals back to the L1s too quickly, you could do all sorts of different behaviors and basically like kind of like rug like the L2, right? But if you have that buffer of like say 7 days, it becomes a lot harder to do. But that's sort of like a big disadvantage though. Having layer two assets stayed on the layer two. Well, what happens if something happens with the layer two? Then you kind of don't have that layer one security and you're kind of screwed, right? Until 7 days have passed by and you can withdraw your funds back to the layer one. So I think it's another like kind of like interesting approach to scalability. It's still something that's kind of up in the air. For Fantom, we're not really focused on layer two scaling. We're more focused on layer one scaling, with, for example, like the core consensus or the middleware technology that I kind of talked about. I saw a question there about the SnapSync timeline. I can tell people right now, SnapSync upgrade is being rolled out to the mainnet right now, beginning with non-validating nodes. So these are nodes that don't participate in consensus, but still need to sync up with the network. And then afterwards, it'll be with validating nodes as well. So there's a technical article coming out kind of illustrating a few of the immediate technology improvements that are coming, which are vast improvements in network. One of them is SnapSync. They'll go into a lot more detail. But yeah, the SnapSync upgrade is being rolled out right now as we speak on the mainnet. It's already kind of public. And so, for example, there'll be a lot of benefits to that. So for example, obviously with the sync times, there'll be a fraction of what they are right now. So on the testnet, sync times were before SnapSync, a full sync was 40 hours. With SnapSync, I think it was about 8 or 9 minutes. So we'll see similar benefits for the mainnet, and there'll be stats coming out for that as well. And so with faster sync times, it means that we can increase network throughput, because one of the limiting factors for Fantom's technology is that the transaction processing is so fast that actually in some cases nodes can't keep up because the nodes simply can't sync fast enough. And so we've had to kind of limit the network throughput. But once we have SnapSync in place across all of the validating nodes, syncing will happen much, much faster. And so we should be able to increase the network throughput by a lot, which means that we can start processing transactions a lot more and get gas fees lower. And have more scalability. So that's kind of like the immediate plan right now, at least when it comes to consensus.
That's awesome. And yeah, guys in the community also, like, keep them questions coming. We'll address all of them in the end of the episode here. Whatever you want to know from Michael or from us, just drop it in the chat here and make some noise. Anything that you want to know, we'll talk about in the end of the episode here. And then I was wondering, Michael, like, have you thought about the difference there, like from like layer 2 scaling and then Fantom, like, and then there's like the Cosmos ecosystem, which has that, like, let's call it like atomic composability. Like, you don't have the trade-offs from like a layer 2 scaling on Ethereum. And you have like your own chains and so on. Have you ever thought about like integrating with like with the Cosmos ecosystem, for example, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean that's something that is totally possible. I mean, back in 2019 or / early like 2020, we did kind of experiment connecting to the Cosmos SDK, and that definitely did work, because the consensus technology for Fantom is kind of its own component, right? It's kind of its own standalone that we've integrated directly to the EVM, and then we'll integrate the consensus with the new middleware that's coming out. So in terms of integrating with the Cosmos ecosystem, yeah, that is something that is technically possible. Is that something that's like really immediate and on our roadmap that we're very much focused on? Not really. That's not really our priority. But if people are interested in doing that, they can go ahead and definitely do that. And if the Cosmos team is interested in talking about it, we're definitely interested in having those conversations. But again, because there's only a limited amount of time and limited amount of resources, but so many different problems and things that we can kind of like experiment on, our kind of focus is narrow. It's focused on the consensus improvements. It's focused on, for example, when it comes to consensus, like we're starting to investigate, better ways to do P2P communication, investigating our own versional sharding as well for ABFT. And on the middleware, it's kind of the stuff that we talked about. It's really just those sort of areas that we're really narrowly focused on, because it's a lot of work there. There are a lot of problems that we've kind of identified. And, we don't want to kind of spread ourselves too thin about working on, let's work on layer 2s, let's work on roll-ups, let's work on integrating with other, so-called, I guess, like parachains or IBC that is out there. Let's just focus on a narrow, band of massive technology improvements. So that's what the plan is on the technical side of things.
Cool. That's great. Fair enough. And so there was a lot of buzz recently. It was like Andre Cronje leaving crypto in general, and like obviously he was an advisor to Fantom as well, and like being involved with the project since very, very early on. How does that affect you guys at like Fantom or like Fantom Foundation? What's the takeaway there? Yeah, I guess that's something a lot of people probably would like to know in the comments here as well. Like, yeah, what's the impact there of Andre Cronje leaving, basically?
Well, I still talk to Andre a lot. I think when it comes to like our technology improvements and development of the ecosystem, not really that much actually changes because contrary to a lot of myths that are out there, Andre was not a core developer, right? And Anton is not even like a distributed systems engineer. He's not even like a blockchain engineer. He's more of like a front end like web application based like engineer, right? So he wasn't working on the consensus at all. And so, in terms of like technology improvements that are coming out there, there's been absolutely no change in the timeline, because there simply wasn't anything to hand over, because Andre wasn't involved in that. Andre was involved in some like initial discussions about an experimentation, with Fantom's core technology back in 2018 and 2019, but that was like almost 3 years ago. Since then, his main focus has really been on DeFi, as people kind of like know, and launching a variety of DeFi applications and kind of talking about it and like the innovation in the space. I think there are a number of reasons why Andre sort of has taken the step back, from being public, that I kind of want to get into, because some of the conversations kind of a bit private. But fundamentally for Fantom, like nothing really changes. We have tremendous number of transactions on the chain. I've heard of not a single project that's come to us or that I've heard via my different channels that have said, oh, we decided not to deploy on Fantom anymore because like Andre isn't like publicly there anymore. I haven't heard anybody say that. We're still working with all the projects that we were before, and people are still integrating with Fantom. Like a few days ago, Alpha Finance announced that they're going to be launching on Fantom, and Alpha Finance is Alpha Mahora is a big project on Ethereum, and they're coming to Fantom. And we had like other announcements like with Anchor, with Beefy about liquid staking, and there's a lot more ecosystem announcements in the pipeline that we're scheduling announcements for. So like fundamentally, nothing has really changed about the project. The technology is still there. It's still ABFT. There are a number of things that we're working on there. There's a lot of middleware development that's happening as well. So we're just going to continue doing that work. Now, sort of like, of course, like Andre has like a big following, and there's sort of like, the whole narrative around Andre. I think we're going to step away from like, narratives about like one individual and, narratives about Andre, or, if it's narratives about me or narratives about whoever, and really just think about like the underlying technology and the chain that we have at the moment. Fantom's come a long way from 2018, basically having nothing and having a lot of problems after the ICO, to a chain now that's one of the most popular smart contract platforms out there. That's a really that's a really important thing to me, and that's something that the whole foundation team is 100% committed on. The devs have despite kind of like the drama that's been going on in the community, etc. The devs have not made a single word or statement about it. Nothing. They've continued doing exactly the same work that they've been doing. And in fact, they started to work faster because we're onboarding more people. And just one final thing, it is very, very unfortunate, the tweet that Anton gave out, because it was misleading. It was not accurate. It caused a lot of problems for Fantom, as well as like other projects out there. That's what really caused a lot of the turmoil that you've been seeing going around for the past week. And so, it is sad that one tweet has caused this many problems, not just for Fantom but for other projects that Andre and Anton have been involved in at some point. But fundamentally, for any of these other projects, just with AnySwap, like nothing changes about them. The AnySwap team have had their own team that I know personally very well. They're extremely competent. They recently fixed a major bug with their ecosystem very fast and very professionally. Back in January, that people like researchers that I've worked with before had identified and fixed. And so, that team has built are the people that built the underlying technology for years. So it's not Andre that built the underlying technology. It's not Andre that runs 25 projects had been running 25 projects simultaneously. No one individual can do that, right? Andre played a big role in constructing those teams, in advising those teams, but he wasn't the one that ultimately has been running these projects. It's the teams themselves. And it's the same thing for Fantom as well. The team is still here, and we're working faster and better than we were before.
That's great to hear. It's definitely the right focus there. And maybe you can give a quick intro, like how decentralized is actually the Fantom developer team, kind of like you have the Fantom Foundation and then like probably contributors, and like how many people working there, and like how decentralized is that in a way? Or
so in terms of like the Fantom ecosystem, it's very, very much decentralized. I mean, virtually like every project that you see on the Fantom ecosystem is just community driven. It wasn't a foundation like reaching out and being like, oh, we'll pay you to deploy on Fantom or anything like that, because we don't pay people to deploy on Fantom. It was, the people in the community that have found Fantom, that have found it on the internet and being like, hey, this is interesting technology. People were talking about it. People say, there's interesting consensus. I'm a developer on Ethereum. Let's deploy on Fantom. Let's see how it goes, and let's just launch, a DeFi application or NFT application or whatever application it might be, and just kind of see how it goes. And that's what's really led to the community growth. Because what happened in 2020, how we kind of took off, is that there were 2 dexes that launched on Fantom. There were some of the very first projects that launched on Fantom. There was Spooky Swap and Spirit Swap. And in fact, Spooky Swap is one of the largest dexes in the world, and it only runs on Fantom, and it does a tremendous amount of volume. It's probably the most popular application on the Fantom ecosystem. And they had like user experiences that were so good that I think they were even better than like what they forked from, which was Uniswap and SushiSwap. And so, these people, got a lot of traction because the applications were very high quality. And so users were attracted to them. Users were like, wow, Fantom, it seems like these, projects are really good, doing swaps on them, doing transactions on them is so much cheaper than doing on Ethereum, which is getting more and more expensive over time. Let's start building stuff on Fantom, right? And then so you had more applications built on Fantom, which led to like more users, which led to more applications, which kind of led to the exponential growth that we have at the moment. So in the past 2 years, the growth has been like almost entirely like organic, which is like incredible to see. On the Fantom core middleware development side, most of that development is being from the foundation, right? But we do actually have a lot of feedback from the community. I do have a lot of people messaging me and giving me feedback about kind of our approach to, say, middleware, kind of approach to core technology, giving advice, talking to our developers. And actually from time to time, you see GitHub issues being launched on the Go-Opera code base, which is the underlying code base, which is all open source for the Fantom technology. And they give feedback as to like, we need certain commands, or how does this work, or how does that work? So we even have a lot of community involvement on the core technology side. Now, obviously, it's not as much as the general Fantom community because it's very specific knowledge, but we still have those like people with that kind of knowledge in the ecosystem that kind of help us out. I have a lot of private conversations with these people telling us how we can do RPCs better, and we've incorporated some of their feedback into some more announcements about RPCs we've got coming forward. We had ideas about core consensus tech, which the feedback was given to the developers, which they've kind of like taken on board as well. So on the consensus side, we also have community involvement, but the vast majority of community involvement is on the application side with the applications that are deployed on Fantom. I think that's what's amazing. This has all really been organic growth. The foundation is just there to help support and grow the ecosystem, first and foremost via technology, but then also encouraging people and kind of evangelizing like on, on this podcast or this show and other shows, just really spreading the word about Fantom and the Fantom ecosystem, and just saying to people, try it out, have a look at it, play around with the technology. The technology that we have at the moment, yes, there are still limitations to it, but this is a baseline. So you can only get better from here on with improvements in the underlying technology. And so, I just tell people, just, play around with Fantom, experience it for yourself, see what it's like, connect it with MetaMask, connect it with Coinbase Wallet, connect it with all these sorts of applications, and then just participate in the ecosystem, see if you like it or not.
Yeah, really encouraging to see all the organic growth that's happened here. And I think that's one of the main success factors with a chain, with a layer one chain, that it can grow organically with applications, with the different teams joining in, that there is no incentive strictly from the foundation paying these teams to start building. They're finding their way into the ecosystem on their own. Really encouraging words. So, Michael, looking forward to the future here. What are the next few big things on the roadmap for Fantom in the coming years?
We have a couple of sponsorship announcements that are going to be made this month. We've also got a technical article going out, which is a little bit general as well, just to kind of like help people understand exactly like how the underlying Fantom consensus works and how it's different from, say, Ethereum. Because there are some people still in the community that say, oh yeah, Fantom is just like somehow a copy of Ethereum, which literally doesn't make any sense. So we kind of explain in simple terms like how it's different. And we've also got some really exciting news in terms of a couple of team members that are joining us to kind of like accelerate the underlying technology, joining us full time to 100% focus on just technology growth in kind of the areas that we mentioned. So those are the announcements that I can kind of tease a bit that are coming out, and they'll be coming out this month.
That's really exciting, and I think it is truly like a very common misconception that like an EVM chain is the same as Ethereum. So I think this is something it's definitely worth talking about. I don't know if you want to talk about it now or like we all wait for the announcement, but probably that's the better way to go. In general, like I would be very keen to understand better like your big vision for Fantom. So where do you see it in the next 5 years? And we already talked about a lot here today with like moving away from the EVM and so on, and like many different scenarios. But like, what's the grand vision, and how does the world look like in which Fantom is ultra successful?
Yeah, so I'm very, very bullish long term on blockchain technologies. I think blockchain technologies will be as large as the internet is. I see no reason why it can't be. You know, with the amount of like benefits you get from using P2P technology, whether it's like DeFi, NFTs, that we talked about, and also another idea that I think is worth exploring, which is group-based insurance ideas, removing the third-party insurance provider. You know, there's enormous benefits there that will just be as big as the internet. It's just a matter of time in terms of adoption, people knowing more about blockchain technology, people knowing how to use MetaMask and other tools, as well as like a lot of technology problems that still need to be solved. And so technology problems that need to be solved are like on the middleware, on the core technology, and for Fantom, kind of my long-term vision is that we become like one of, if not the biggest smart contract platform out there. And then we have the right technology stack that does it. You know, we have our own middleware stack that we can continue to improve on. We have our own client, like our own version of Geth client as well that's connected to the middleware stack. And we have like a vastly improved consensus engine that incorporates elements of sharding into it as well. And so that to me is how we get horizontal scaling. That to me is, you know, how we take blockchain technology from the few millions of users that we have right now, because it's still very, very early days, to literally like 1 billion users, 2 billion users, to as many users as, you know, use the internet these days. And so I think given enough time, these technology problems will be solved. They're not going to be solved in 1 or 2 years, to be honest with you. They're going to be solved probably in, you know, within the next decade. But once they're solved, blockchains will scale so much, and there'll be so many people using them for many more use cases than just currently what they're being used for. So very bullish, you know, long term on blockchain technology, and also for Fantom. You know, we want to be part of that growth. We want to capture a significant amount of that growth, obviously.
Excellent. And not investment advice here, but in your mind, what is the best opportunity to earn alpha currently in the Fantom ecosystem?
You know, again, like I don't really give investment advice, but there's many of like DeFi opportunities out there. There'll be liquid staking opportunities as well. You know, it's all just a matter of like risk and reward. You know, if you believe a project is undervalued, you might want to, you know, consider purchasing tokens in it. I can only really speak generally though, because I don't want to give, you know, investment advice, obviously. Yeah, DYOR, of course, always.
Definitely. Okay, so let's get into the community questions now. You've already teased some of the announcements. Maybe you could just reiterate those announcements before we get into community questions that are coming up this month here, Michael.
Yeah, so we've got a technical announcement coming out on the immediate technical benefits that are being rolled out, as well as like a description of like how Fantom technology works via like a couple of analogies. We've got announcements of new team members joining that are working full-time with us, specifically on the technology. And we also have a couple of sponsorship announcements that are going to be made as well. So those are things that are kind of in the pipeline for this month.
That's awesome. Really looking forward to it. Yeah, that's cool. And then we can move forward to the community questions. And guys, if you have some more questions, keep them coming. Drop them now. And first one by Jamie T. What happens to sFTM if the underlying Fantom gets slashed?
So the sFTM is still there, but you can only use the sFTM in limited fashion. So that's why it's not like a generalized like ERC20 contract. You can only use it to generate FUSD, right? And that's only at like a 300% collateralization ratio. So even though like you might have sFTM still around and your FTM is gone, the only thing you would have still worth something would be the FUSD that you've generated from it, because sFTM is not tradable. You know, it's not something that's like liquid, and that's important because you need to have some sort of slashing mechanism or some sort of penalty in there as part of a proof of stake system. Otherwise, you suffer from the nothing at stake problem, which means that when there's no risk of people losing their assets at all, in a proof of stake system, then people can perform what the network considers to be malicious activity and suffer no penalties from it. So it's a really big security issue. So in order to solve the nothing at stake problem, you need some sort of slashing, and so that's why sFTM is kind of like a special token. It's not like a easily tradable ERC20 token or anything like that.
Awesome. And next question here is from Benedict, and he asks, how does FTM think about mass adoption?
Mass adoption really comes down to a better user experience, right? So how do we get faster transactions? How do you get cheaper transactions? How do you get more secure transactions? Because that's what people like really care about in the end. That's what the users care about, and that's what really helps the ecosystem growth. So the technology is all geared as to getting a better user experience, and mass adoption for us is just like growing the community as much as possible. So the community has grown tremendously from where it was, just a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, we were doing, maybe a few thousand transactions per day. Now we're doing, hundreds of thousands, if not like 1 million on some days. And so for us, it's just getting those numbers up, getting more transactions, daily transactions, getting more wallets created on a daily basis, getting more applications on Fantom of high quality that people like really respect, because like the more high quality applications on Fantom, the more the ecosystem grows. And so it's a win-win. So we have every interest to make sure that projects on Fantom succeed as much as possible. And that's why like, Spooky Swap and Spirit Swap were very good projects from the beginning. And we got kind of lucky with them because those projects encourage people to kind of discover Fantom, to deploy on Fantom, and it really helped us kickstart the growth that we have at the moment. So mass adoption is just getting as many users as possible, getting as many daily transactions as possible, getting as many applications as possible. That's all it really is.
Cool, that makes sense. And we have a question here from George Valentin. He asked like 3 times on like a new all-in wallet. I don't know, like what's that about exactly? But is there like anything? Like what's the wallet landscape currently in Fantom, and are you working on any like all-in wallet there or?
Yeah, so we have our own wallet produced from the foundation. It's called the PWA wallet. Integrates with Ledger, integrates with MetaMask, kind of like operates as you kind of expect like a wallet to do. So we got a new wallet coming out. It's in beta at the moment, so we're just testing it right now. But it'll be much better improvement on the current PWA wallet that we have at the moment. To be honest, I can't really give a timeline at this point because we're still testing it out. But if everything works fine, it'll be out pretty soon. So yeah, there is an all-in-one wallet coming out soon, which will have a lot more functionality than the current wallet. And so yeah, I hope people enjoy it. Yeah, we'll do like a switch over.
Very cool. And next question here from Shiba Inu Coin. How's your relationship with Dubai in the Middle East at the moment? Any advances in creating the first smart city in Dubai?
Yeah, I mean, as you guys are aware of, we had a pretty successful pilot program in Afghanistan with the Ministry of Health. I mean, we certified like thousands of pharmaceutical products, generic pharmaceutical products going out of Afghanistan because they have a big problem of counterfeit products, even for generic drugs. So we were very successful in that rollout in Kabul, but obviously with the change of government, in Afghanistan, it made working in the country untenable. So we're not doing any work in Afghanistan anymore, very unfortunately. We are talking to a number of different governments in the region, for example, like Pakistan, Bangladesh, which are 2 very big Middle Eastern countries. But we're also starting to talk to countries that are like in Europe as well. So there's some discussions in Italy, in Switzerland, which is great because these are, in some respects, easier environments to kind of like navigate through. Because they're different governments in Europe as compared to the Middle East, but there'll be announcements coming there soon as well. Hopefully, like later down the track. But we are having active discussions with a few banks, with a few governments, and hopefully we can like roll something out on the enterprise side. I mean, the big focus on Fantom is mainly on the technology and the community, but we do also explore enterprise ideas as well, because I think they can also help grow the Fantom ecosystem as a whole. So it's not our top priority, but it is something that we also kind of discuss and talk to governments about as well.
That's cool, and it bleeds directly into the question by Edgar here, who's asking like, what's the best enterprise use case for FTM, and is there a real world example that illustrates this? That's probably exactly that, right?
I'd say a big like enterprise use case is supply chain management. Because if you have to do a lot of transactions on the network, IoT related transactions or transactions related to like a lot of physical goods, the network has to be fast enough and secure enough that you can process these transactions. For example, if you're doing certification of like millions of products, you need to be able to process millions of transactions, and not just process like on-chain transactions, but also process RPC transactions. Each time someone scans a product, it needs to communicate with the blockchain, and so you need a network that's very scalable, that's low cost. And Fantom is a blockchain that's definitely suitable for those sort of supply chain issues. And we did have a successful example in Afghanistan, as I talked about. I think we rolled out tracking software to about 30 pharmacies in Kabul, and so people could download an app and they could scan a product that they bought. It was a few products from about 3 companies that were being imported from India into Afghanistan. And on a daily basis, we had a few thousand scans. So people were scanning these products, really checking the authenticity to make sure they weren't buying counterfeit products. Because counterfeit products, even for generic drugs, you would think, maybe for patented drugs it makes sense because there's a patent on it, right? Even for generic drugs where the patent has expired, there's still a lot of counterfeit generic products, at least in Afghanistan, just because the standards are not, the quality controls are not very strong there. So people can like substitute in, substances that you don't know what you're taking into some of these generic drugs, like things like, for example, like, like diabetic cream. And it's kind of like, it was surprising for me to hear because you wouldn't really expect it. And it's sort of like quite dangerous as well, because you don't know exactly what you're taking. With the supply chain solution we had in place, you'll know what you're taking because at different points in the supply chain process and to the end user, you'll be able to scan the data to check its authenticity secured by on-chain data, that it came from the correct manufacturer, that it came from specific manufacturers in India. Unfortunately, that project is no longer running because the Taliban are in control, and there's no way we can do any business in Afghanistan since then. That being said, though, the technology is still owned by us since it was a pilot program, so we can take this same technology stack and apply it in elsewhere, and that's exactly what we're trying to do in other countries as well. So the technology still belongs to us. It wasn't owned by the Afghan government. It was owned entirely by us, and so we're just going to reuse that technology stack that we've already built for other supply chain use cases. And the solution is generic enough, no pun intended, that it can be used for all sorts of supply chain tracking, not just for pharmaceutical products, but anything that is physical in bulk. So any like foodstuffs, groceries, and that sort of thing, the same solution can be used. It's no different, really.
Yeah, that's massive, and I think everyone here can't wait to see it rolled out for a different application. And another question here for Edgar. Once all the FTM is in circulation, are there any plans to introduce deflationary features, or will the supply be static at that point?
Yeah, we're actively exploring. I think it's EIP, if I got it correct, 11559. So the deflation. Sorry, there's so many EIPs out there. I kind of mix it up sometimes. The deflationary model that Ethereum has in place. So that's something that we're looking at.
Okay, very cool. And I think we just have one more community question here. Yeah.
There's one question from X Gamers when Felix Exchange, and Bro Miner just pointed out that it's not made by the foundation, but I don't know. Do you have any insights on Felix Exchange?
Yeah. So as the guy mentioned, it's not run by Fantom Foundation. It's run by a big community supporter of ours called Harry Ye. He was like completely independent of us, big community member. So we appreciate that. In terms of Felix Exchange, I'm not really sure. Last time he told me was Q1 2022, but don't hold me to it because timelines might have been updated then. I do know that they're actively working on it because I do know the people that are working on it. So they have to sort out issues around AML, KYC, the integration with Binance Cloud, that sort of thing. But I can't really give you any more details than that, unfortunately. But it's not something the foundation is ourselves involved in.
Cool. Thanks for the insights. And we have a 000 user there asking us to buy the dip. But based on his comments, I don't know if there will be a dip after he's done buying. Okay. Michael, it was really good having you on here for the episode. It was great asking all these questions and learning more about Fantom and Fantom Foundation. So how can people follow you and learn more about the stuff you're working on?
Yeah, so like the best resource to go to is our website. It's Fantom.Foundation. That has a link, to all of our socials, to a general description about Fantom, to description about the technology more in depth, links to our GitHub, etc. So that's going to be an all-in-one resource. You can also follow us on Twitter at Fantom FTM. So at Fantom FTM, we have over 400,000 followers there. You can also follow myself personally if you like at Michael F. Kong. So that's my personal Twitter, where I don't really talk about personal things. I just talk about Fantom stuff. So it's really kind of an extension of the Fantom Foundation account is a way to think about it currently. So yeah, follow us, in Twitter, go to our website, and that's where the latest announcements are going to be. And that's where most of the information is going to be as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, everyone, this is Michael Kong, CEO and CIO of Fantom Foundation. And be sure to check out previous episodes of Staking Mondays. You can find these episodes on our YouTube channel and on Spotify. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, smash that like button, and share this video around as much as possible, guys. So thank you so much for watching. And as always, happy staking. See you on the next Staking Mondays episode.
Thanks, everyone, for your time. See ya.